Mia, do you remember the first English sentence you ever said out loud to a stranger?
Oh no, please don't make me remember that.
That bad?
Honestly, yes. I mixed up two tenses in one sentence and the person just stared at me.
That's exactly the kind of moment we're talking about today.
Uh-oh, I have a feeling I'm the example again.
A little bit, yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Mia and Simon English Podcast. I'm Simon.
And I'm Mia, professional maker of embarrassing English mistakes.
Today we're talking about something almost every learner deals with, broken English, and more importantly, how to actually fix it.
Before we start, if you're new here, this podcast helps you learn real, natural English through simple, everyday conversations. So make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss new episodes.
Okay, Mia, let's start with the term itself. What does broken English even mean?
I think it usually means English that has grammar mistakes, wrong word order, or missing words, but the meaning is still mostly understandable.
Right. It's not that the person can't communicate at all, it's that the sentence isn't quite correct.
Exactly. And honestly, I don't love the term broken because it makes it sound like something is damaged or wrong with the person.
That's a good point. It's not really broken, it's just still developing.
Exactly. I think developing English or learning English is a much kinder way to describe the same thing.
I completely agree. The word broken carries so much unnecessary shame with it.
Right. And shame usually makes learning harder, not easier, like we've talked about in other episodes.
Exactly. This connects to what we said about permission versus pressure. Shame adds pressure, and pressure blocks progress.
Exactly that. So today, we're going to talk about broken English not as a flaw, but as a natural stage everyone passes through.
Okay, so where does broken English actually come from? Why does it happen so consistently across different learners?
I think a big part of it is direct translation from your first language.
What do you mean by direct translation?
Like taking a sentence structure that works perfectly in your native language and translating it word for word into English.
Oh, I do that constantly, especially when I'm nervous or speaking quickly.
Most learners do. The problem is grammar rules aren't the same across languages, so direct translation often creates incorrect sentences.
Right, the words might all be correct individually, but the structure feels unnatural in English.
Exactly, and that's actually a really important distinction. Wrong words versus wrong structure are two completely different problems.
That's such a helpful way to separate the issue. So which one is usually harder to fix?
I think structure is harder, honestly, because it's less obvious. You can look up a word easily, but structure requires deeper practice.
Right, a dictionary can fix a vocabulary gap instantly. Grammar structure takes much longer to internalize.
Exactly, and I think that's why so many learners feel stuck even after learning thousands of words.
That's such an important insight, honestly. Vocabulary alone doesn't fix broken sentence structure.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings learners have about fixing their English.
I want to talk more about what actually helps fix that deeper structural problem beyond just learning more words. Okay, so if learning more vocabulary doesn't fix structural mistakes, what actually helps?
I think listening to a huge amount of natural English is one of the most powerful tools, honestly.
Why does listening specifically help with structure?
Because when you hear correct sentence patterns repeated constantly, your brain slowly starts absorbing the structure naturally without memorizing rules directly.
So it's less about studying grammar consciously and more about pattern recognition over time.
Exactly that. Similar to how children learn language, actually, mostly through repeated exposure, not formal grammar lessons.
That connects to our mouth training episode too, actually. The body learning through repetition, not just the mind memorizing facts.
Exactly the same principle, just applied here to sentence structure instead of pronunciation specifically.
Okay, but does that mean grammar rules aren't useful at all?
No, I don't think that's true either. I think grammar rules are useful, but mainly as support tools, not the main method.
What do you mean by support tool?
Like, grammar rules can help you understand why a mistake happened after you've already noticed it through exposure or feedback.
So, grammar explains the pattern, but exposure actually builds the pattern into natural instinct.
Exactly. And I think many learners rely too heavily on rules alone without enough real exposure to actually internalize them.
That's such an important distinction, honestly. Knowing a rule intellectually versus actually using it naturally in real speech.
Exactly. Those are two very different skills, even though they're closely related.
Okay, what about speaking practice specifically? Does that help fix broken structure too, not just listening?
Definitely. I think speaking is actually where a lot of the real fixing happens, even though it feels uncomfortable at first.
Why does speaking specifically matter beyond just listening passively?
Because when you speak, you're forced to actually produce the structure yourself, not just recognize it when someone else says it.
Right, recognition and production really are two separate skills.
Exactly. And I think a lot of learners can understand grammar perfectly while listening, but still struggle to produce it correctly themselves.
That's such a common gap, honestly. Understanding versus producing.
Exactly. And speaking practice is really the only way to close that specific gap effectively.
Okay, what about mistakes during that speaking practice? Should learners try to avoid them completely?
Definitely not, honestly. I think mistakes during speaking practice are actually necessary, not something to avoid.
Necessary how?
Well, mistakes reveal exactly where your structure is still incorrect, which gives you very specific, useful information.
So a mistake isn't really failure, it's more like feedback.
Exactly that. Without making the mistake first, you wouldn't even know exactly what needs fixing.
This connects back to our overthinking episode too, actually. Trying to speak perfectly before even starting often just creates paralysis.
Exactly the same pattern. Waiting for perfect structure before speaking usually means never speaking at all.
Right, and speaking imperfectly then correcting gradually works so much better than waiting for perfection first.
Exactly. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest mindset shifts learners need to fix broken English long term.
What about correction specifically? Should someone immediately correct every mistake they notice while speaking?
I don't think so, actually. I think correcting every single mistake in real time can actually interrupt natural speaking flow.
So what should happen instead?
I think noticing mistakes without stopping completely and reviewing them afterward works much better for most learners.
Right, separating the moment of speaking from the moment of correcting.
Exactly, because trying to do both at the same time often creates hesitation and unnecessary self-consciousness.
This makes so much sense, honestly. Fixing English isn't just about grammar, it's also about managing the process itself effectively.
Exactly right. I want to talk next about specific daily habits that actually help fix broken English consistently over time.
Okay. So, what specific daily habits actually help fix broken English consistently, beyond just general listening and speaking?
I think one really effective habit is recording yourself speaking, then listening back critically afterward.
We mentioned recording in our mouth training episode too, actually.
Exactly the same tool, just applied here specifically to grammar and structure instead of pronunciation.
How does listening back actually help fix structural mistakes specifically?
Because in the moment of speaking, you're often too focused on communicating to notice small structural errors clearly.
Right. Your brain is busy trying to express the idea, not analyzing grammar simultaneously.
Exactly, but when you listen back afterward, without that same pressure, mistakes become much easier to actually notice.
That's such a useful separation. Again, speaking and analyzing happening at different times, not simultaneously.
Exactly, and I think that separation removes a lot of unnecessary stress from the whole learning process.
Okay. What's another daily habit that helps fix broken English?
I think reading sentences out loud, specifically ones written by native speakers, really helps too.
How is that different from just reading silently?
Well, reading out loud forces you to physically produce correct structure repeatedly, training both your mouth and your brain together.
Right. This connects to what we said earlier about pattern absorption through repeated exposure.
Exactly, and reading out loud specifically combines visual structure with physical production, which reinforces the pattern even more strongly.
That makes sense. Two senses working together instead of just one.
Exactly, and I think that combination makes correct structure stick much faster than reading silently alone.
Okay. What about using very simple sentences on purpose? Does that actually help fix broken English?
Definitely. I think a lot of learners actually make more mistakes by trying to use overly complicated sentences too early.
Why does that happen?
Because complicated sentences require managing multiple grammar rules simultaneously, which increases the chance of mistakes significantly.
So simplifying isn't a weakness, it's actually a smart strategy.
Exactly that. Speaking correctly in simple sentences is far more valuable than speaking incorrectly in complicated ones.
That's such an important mindset shift, honestly. A lot of learners feel pressure to sound advanced immediately.
Exactly, but correct simple English communicates far more effectively than broken complicated English.
Right. And I imagine simple correct sentences actually sound more confident too, even if they're not fancy.
Exactly. Confidence often comes from correctness, not complexity.
Okay, what about learning from your specific mistakes rather than generic grammar lessons? Does personalized correction matter?
Definitely. I think generic grammar lessons help with general understanding, but personal mistakes reveal your specific weak points.
So it's not just about learning grammar in general, it's about identifying your own repeated patterns of error.
Exactly, because most learners make the same few mistakes repeatedly, not random new mistakes every single time.
That's such a useful insight. If you can identify your repeated patterns, you can focus your practice much more efficiently.
Exactly. Instead of studying everything equally, you focus extra attention on your specific recurring weak points.
This connects to something we talked about in our savings episode too, actually. Small, specific, targeted effort instead of broad, unfocused effort.
Exactly the same theme, honestly, appearing again in a completely different context.
I want to talk next about the emotional side of fixing broken English too, like dealing with embarrassment while learning. So let's talk about the emotional side of this. How do you deal with embarrassment while trying to fix broken English?
I think the first thing is accepting that embarrassment is basically unavoidable during this process, honestly.
Right. Almost everyone feels embarrassed at some point while learning a language.
Exactly, and I think trying to avoid that embarrassment completely usually just delays actual progress.
This connects to our overthinking episode too, actually. Waiting for a comfortable moment that might never actually come.
Exactly the same pattern. Comfort often comes after practice, not before it, no matter what area of life we're talking about.
So, how do you personally deal with that embarrassment in the moment when it actually happens?
I try to remind myself that most listeners genuinely care more about understanding my message than judging my grammar.
Right. We talked about that same idea in our positivity episode too, actually. Imagined judgment versus real judgment.
Exactly, and I think that same idea applies perfectly here as well. People are usually far more forgiving than we imagine.
What about learners who've had genuinely negative experiences, though, like being laughed at or corrected harshly in the past?
That's such an important point, honestly, because that kind of experience can create lasting fear around speaking altogether.
How would someone even begin healing from that kind of experience?
I think starting with very low pressure environments really helps, like speaking alone or with someone who's specifically supportive and patient.
So, rebuilding trust gradually, rather than jumping straight back into high-pressure speaking situations.
Exactly, because forcing yourself into a scary situation too quickly can actually reinforce the fear instead of fixing it.
That makes so much sense. Small, safe steps first before bigger, more exposed situations.
Exactly. And I think this connects to something we've said in almost every single episode, honestly. Small steps repeated consistently beat big dramatic pushes.
It really does keep appearing everywhere, no matter what specific topic we're discussing.
I think that's because it's genuinely true across almost every area of growth, honestly, not just language learning specifically.
Okay, what about comparing your English to other learners or to native speakers? Does that create extra pressure too?
Definitely. I think comparison is honestly one of the most damaging things learners do to themselves.
How so? Specifically in this context.
Well, comparing your current broken English to someone else's fluent English ignores that they started at a different point, at a different time.
Right. This connects directly back to our episode about starting late, actually. Different starting lines, different growth timelines.
Exactly the same idea again, just applied here specifically to language learning instead of general life goals.
So instead of comparing to others, what should learners actually focus on?
I think comparing your current English to your own English from 6 months ago is a much healthier, more accurate measurement.
Right. That removes the unfair comparison completely and replaces it with genuine personal progress instead.
Exactly. And I think most learners, if they're honest, can actually see real improvement over time, even if it doesn't always feel that way daily.
This makes me think differently about my own English mistakes too, honestly, even now as someone hosting an English podcast.
The same here, honestly. I think we both still make small mistakes sometimes, even after years of practice.
Right, and I think that's exactly the point, actually. Fixing broken English isn't really about reaching some final perfect destination.
Exactly. It's more about continuous, gradual improvement without ever expecting complete perfection to arrive one day.
I think we're getting close to something really important here.
All right, so if we had to summarize everything, what would you say is the real key to fixing broken English?
I think it's this. Broken English isn't a flaw, it's simply a natural stage everyone passes through while learning.
Right, and the word broken itself carries unnecessary shame that doesn't actually help the learning process at all.
Exactly. And we talked about how listening to natural English helps the brain absorb correct structure gradually through repeated exposure.
Right, similar to how children learn language, mostly through pattern recognition, not memorized rules alone.
We also talked about speaking practice being essential because recognition and production are actually two completely different skills.
Exactly, and mistakes during that speaking practice aren't failures. They're actually useful feedback about exactly what needs fixing.
Right. And we talked about specific habits too, like recording yourself, reading out loud, and using simple sentences on purpose.
Yes, simple, correct English communicating far more effectively than complicated broken English ever could.
We also talked about the emotional side, honestly dealing with embarrassment and healing from potentially negative past experiences.
Right, starting small in low-pressure environments, rebuilding trust gradually instead of forcing big, scary steps immediately.
And finally, we talked about comparison and how comparing yourself to your own past progress works so much better than comparing to others.
Exactly, because everyone starts at a different point, with a different timeline, just like we discussed in our episode about starting late.
If someone listening today feels embarrassed about their broken English, what would you want them to hear?
I would say every fluent speaker you admire once sounded exactly like you do right now. Nobody skips that stage completely.
That's such an important reminder, honestly. And I would add, mistakes aren't proof that you're bad at English. They're proof that you're actually practicing.
Exactly. Silence teaches you nothing, but mistakes, spoken out loud, genuinely teach you something valuable every single time.
This conversation genuinely made me think differently about my own early language mistakes too, honestly.
Same here, actually. I think I finally understand why that first embarrassing sentence I mentioned at the beginning was actually a completely normal, necessary step.
Right. Not a failure, just the very beginning of a much longer, ongoing process.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that process never fully ends, even for people who speak multiple languages fluently.
That's such a comforting thought, actually. There's no final finish line where mistakes suddenly stop happening completely.
Exactly. Just continuous, gradual improvement, one honest mistake and one honest correction at a time.
So, to everyone listening, if you feel like your English is still broken, remember, that's not a permanent label. It's simply where you are right now.
Thanks for listening to Mia and Simon English Podcast.
Keep learning, keep speaking, and keep making those mistakes, because that's exactly how fixing broken English actually works.
See you in the next episode.
Bye for now.